The suburbs of Stockholm are rarely mentioned in travel brochures about Istanbul, but rarely about ones about Stockholm either. They mostly focus on the more famous bits like Gamla stan, Norrmalm and Djurgården, and rarely mention places like Sandsborg. With this video I aim to explain exactly why that is. They're simply not that interesting to visit for most tourists. So, the part of the reason why I'm making this video is so that you don't actually have to go out to the suburbs of Stockholm, because they're really not that interesting. I think it's enough for you to just watch like a 10-minute-ish video about them, and so you don't have to go. And I grew up in one of them in the south of Stockholm, so I know what I'm talking about. Jag är från Hudson. Jag är en jättetuff Hudson-kille, liksom. And I proved it by just saying that, because that's what you say if you're from the hood. Okay. Alright, so this is central Stockholm, woohoo! One could call it the beating heart of the city. I've made videos about parts of it, like Gamla stan and Södermalm, and these are the surrounding intestines and extremities of Stockholm, I suppose, if one wants to keep using the analogy and make things needlessly complicated. Sandsborg is like the spleen of Stockholm. Anyway, as I've mentioned in my other videos about the city, everything outside of Gamla stan historically used to be just farmland. It was only during the last couple of 100 years one could talk about Stockholm having suburbs at all. The city really exploded all over during the early and mid 20th century. People were shagging like maniacs and many moved into the cities from the surrounding countryside. This eventually led to miljonprogrammet between 1965 and 75. Miljonprogrammet means the, let's build like a fuck ton of houses in 10 years program. 1 million to be exact. And they actually seem to have managed. But the suburbs of Stockholm are more varied than that. This building is slightly older than that, for instance, so not part of the miljonprogrammet, but you can find ones exactly like it all around the suburbs of Stockholm that are not too far from the city centre. They're called lamellhus, and aren't they just architectural marvels? Gaudi kan dra sig I snoppen. They are reliable, they were relatively cheap to build, and they have never been known to inspire any artist to create anything. There are obviously way fancier buildings than this, but we'll talk about them later. But these lamellhus make up most of the areas in one of the 3 types of suburbs I will talk about in this very video. Oi, oi, oi. If you like this kind of video, by the way, please do subscribe and leave a like and everything. Okay, thank you. This is a street in Hägerstensåsen in southern Stockholm, and this is one in Blackeberg in the north of Stockholm. These 2 areas are virtually the fucking same, and there are many more like them around the city. I grew up in one of these ones, and it always felt weird visiting friends on the opposite side of town. It sort of felt like you got out at a different exit of the same subway station even though you'd been traveling for like half an hour. They're all identical neighborhoods. They all have the central square close to where the tunnelbana is. There's an ICA close by somewhere, and there is, without fail, a Thai food or sushi place somewhere. Somewhere not too far off is a school made out of these ugly yellow bricks. I have no idea why, but for some reason they decided that this was the color of elementary schools in suburbs of Sweden. I don't know. The school does have a king ruta and perhaps an outdoor table tennis table that no school kid ever uses for, table tennis. The people living in these copy-paste areas are surprisingly diverse. Except for the alcoholics, they're all pretty much like the same all over Stockholm. Anyway, the rents here are not too steep usually, and you don't have to wait that long in the housing queue system to get an apartment here. Well, compared to other bits of Stockholm at least. I mean, 10 years is still quite some time, There are immigrant families from all over the world here, as well as plenty of ethnic Swedes as well, I suppose. Or 2nd and 3rd and up generation Swedes. No one who lives here is particularly rich, but very few, I'd say, are poor either. When I think of a typical suburb in Stockholm, I think of one of these ones. Probably because I grew up in one. But there's also way more fucking expensive ones with way less variety of people. This is Äppelviken. Usch. I mean, I grew up in Stockholm, but this is all very new to me. Peasants like myself usually are not welcome in this part of town. The people who live here are fancy. As you can tell, it's not quite the same as where we were before. These are some of the most expensive houses in Sweden, and you can imagine the type of people who live in them. Most of them are not from Somalia originally, and they probably don't lie awake at night worrying too much about if they can afford next month's rent, These houses are obviously not part of any collective housing initiative of the Swedish welfare state. This is the upper end of the Svensson dream. This place is only really worth a visit if you either live here or want to go on a class trip, These posh neighborhoods don't have that much of interest in them, and I don't think I would want to live here, actually. It's a bit of a hassle getting into town from here, for instance. Well, actually, perhaps not too much of a hassle, because of course daddy's fucking chauffeur drives you anywhere you want, of course. Or you take the helicopter from your private fucking helicopter pad. Jesus. Even though these are suburbs in Stockholm, they're not perhaps what most people think about when hearing about suburbs in Sweden. Especially after watching the news. They probably imagine something a little bit more like the final kind of suburb. Transitions, Jesus. Okay. Welcome to Tenstavan, yo. Just as I hadn't been to Äppelviken, most people who live there probably have never been to this part of town. Like, definitely, actually. Most poor immigrants and refugees who come to Sweden end up in neighborhoods like this one. It's very obvious by just standing around seeing people walking by which sort of part of Stockholm you're in. You can pretty much always find shops like this one, selling lots of what would otherwise be in the world foods section in a big ICA in the city, you know. And a food stall like this one wouldn't exactly have queues around the block in Danderyd, you know. The houses in these suburbs are typical examples of houses built during the 10 years of miljonprogrammet between 1965 and 75. Rents here are obviously the lowest you can find in Stockholm, and the queue time for getting an apartment is the shortest. If anything could be less nipple hardening than Lamellhus, I guess it would be these houses though. But in a weird way, I kind of like them. They have a sort of kids playing football in a parking lot romanticism going on. That's probably just me though. It's fun as well to think that these miljonprogrammen houses were sought after to live in before the old houses in the middle of the city were renovated to have, you know, modern plumbing and insulation and stuff. Suburbs like these ones, especially in cities like Malmö in the south of Sweden, are infamous for their crime rates and gang violence. Pretty much all of the areas in Stockholm considered utsatta områden by the Swedish police are areas like these ones. There are areas in Stockholm where the police find it difficult to operate because of a low participation by the public in legal processes. People are essentially too scared or intimidated to report crimes here. I wish they would have smacked a house like this one right in the middle of Äppelviken or Danderyd or any other fancy area, you know. It would do everyone good, I think. So there you go, those are the different sort of types of suburbs in Stockholm as I see them. Some of them are not considered very safe anymore, and fuck, that's depressing to read when I was doing my research for this video. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a comment and tell me why you liked it, because why the fuck did you? I have one more video I will make about Stockholm, and then I will actually start making videos about Japan again, since I've finally moved back here now. Ja jävlar! Look, this is my new Tokyo apartment. Wow! I'm not really moved in yet, I just moved here. Yay, I'm in Japan. I have Japanese coffee in this mug. It's very sweet and disgusting. Coffee spelled backwards is e-fock, and I don't give e-fock until I've had mine, you know. There will of course be videos about why I moved and how that went and everything, and apartment tours and everything. My goodness, you can bet on this for sure. I still have a couple of Sweden related videos that I want to make first though, so look forward to those. Thank you very much everyone for watching, and thanks especially to the Patreons as always who support me on Patreon. Also especially thank you to Alex for providing the EFOC comment. If you want to make me say anything on upcoming videos, then there's a Patreon tier where you can make me say stuff in videos coming forward. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. As I said, one more about Stockholm. Anyway, okay, bye-bye. Puss fun.